M.O.O.N is back with a full-length album. Come, see. This is his second official album under this moniker, the first being Clinically Blasé. I kind of delved into that a little bit before going into this project, and it felt like some of his Hotline Miami work was blending with some of his more creative passions and styles that he wanted to do. But on this album, while I do think some of the vibes he's putting down are video game-esque in some instances, it's not a track list that feels like it was made for video games. M.O.O.N is very much exploring a different set of sounds within the genre he operates in, which led me to a very interesting listen. Starting off with the first track, Kintsugi, it's a very underwhelming cut. I don't think it's that good of a starter for this album. The vibes are pretty okay, but I don't think there's anything of substance. I really didn't feel myself being wowed by this song. Now, for the second track in the set list, this was Grift, and it was one of the singles that he had dropped before the release of this LP, and I was very fond of it when it first dropped. I liked the vibes it gave me. It left me spinning, almost confused in some way. It had a very good loop going on that was being tweaked subtly here and there to, like, kind of keep it moving on. And within this track list, I think it's very much needed after the dull moment that Kintsugi had provided. For the third track, we hit another low moment, unfortunately. Karen's Locked Groove. I personally wasn't the biggest fan of the loop that was provided for me, and I don't think he did anything to like really mix up the formula on the song. It was very stagnant, and I think the vibe was good in theory, kind of this creepy outside area, maybe a grove or like some sort of manor garden, but I I don't think it was realized in its entirety. I think it was quite lacking, and I'm personally not going to be going back to this one. In track number 4, however, thankfully we had a very good upbeat here with "To Have Trust in You." The booming kicks, the snares that come in or hit you really hard. It's really pretty infectious to start off with, and the leading synth that they have is very warped, and it kind of feels like it's folding in on itself, and you can kind of see how it just like interloops with everything else. It's a really powerful song. The loop was great. I do kind of wish that he had like expanded a little bit more on the sound, but for what I got, truthfully, I think was quite good. And for track number 5, we have Come Alone. It was the second single that he had dropped before this album, and while I do think it's a pretty good cut, at the time of its original release, was quite lukewarm on it. I didn't think it was like all that standoutish, but with its preceding song "To Have Trust in You," I think it leads like kind of has this like little mini narrative going on. And I think it, as a collective, cohesive unit, the 1-2 punch that they give for this, I think is quite good. Um, Other than that, I think it was a bit hollow, though. For the sixth track, Main's Hum. Really, all I can say about this track is how I felt at the end of it, going, okay. For the seventh track, LS7 Swap. It was a bad track. I'm sorry. It was really awful to listen to. It was quite ear grating and even headache inducing. And I consider myself somebody who can tolerate just noise, as it were. I listened and enjoyed The Flying Spaghetti Monster by Dr. P, for crying out loud. But the combination of sounds here just left me feeling rough and with a headache. The best way I can really summarize this song is when the drop first came in and I said out loud, I hope they're not going to put this sound on loop. And for the eighth track, Sometimes Love. I'm a bit conflicted on this one. I think sonically it was pretty alright. I thought the synths that they used were quite flourishing, a bit muffled even. And I liked the percussion loop that they had going on. My biggest problem was the technical side of things, where I wasn't the biggest fan of how they incorporated the pan. It really took me out of the song and like took away from the actual good instrumentals that were going on. I'll definitely say that if the pan wasn't there, I probably would like this song a lot more. And for the ninth track, Patapon. I definitely have the strongest conflicting feelings about this one. I was, for a good portion of it, very bored and just not into at all what was going on. but for whatever reason, the last minute and a half of the song, it was throwing down straight fire. I mean, the drums were coming in nice, the snares were pronounced, the synth was nice and layered. Even the vocal sample that he had looping on in the background the whole time, I thought fit very well in that little last bit of the song. However, for the most of it, I don't think it's worth it to sit through almost 4 minutes of that just to enjoy a minute. Track number 10, Would You, is kind of an interlude track, but I would definitely say was a good highlight within the album. I found it being something that would be put on like a hip hop beat or something to that effect. I think the synth keys were amazing. I thought the percussion loop that was put on was very good. It was quite infectious. And the ghostly and muffled effects that were layered on top as well really pulled the whole project together. And I think it's a good highlight on this project. And what a way to end this album. Locked. This song, when I say, is now my second favorite song by M.O.O.N next to Paris. I say without hyperbole. The snares when they're brought in are infectious. They just this was the first time I was physically moving within this album. I was grooving so hard. The kicks are nice and beefy. The synths that are like somewhat muffled but are just kind of adding this ethereal element to this track. And then there's this short ghostly voice sample that he uses that's like begging you to come back, begging you to stay within this album, this track even. I thought was great. It sent goosebumps down my spine. I mean, this is the strongest showing I have seen from M.O.O.N since Paris, and I really wish the rest of this album was like this. This song is so good, and I love it so much. And with that being said, that's kind of where the album left off. It was a strong ender, kind of a weak opener. We'll jot this up to an inconsistent album, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad one. I think the highlights were immensely high. I just think the low points were a little bit too low in some instances. But I think the vibes overall were quite good, and I never felt myself wanting to just straight up skip at all through it, minus L7 swap, of course. I'd be comfortable giving this a solid 7. A solid 7. I'm feeling strong about that.